that, we will move on to the main event.
Absolutely.
Which is happening in Paris this Saturday night, and it is France v Wales. That's going to be March 20th, Saturday, obviously. 9 o'clock kickoff, that's local time in France, that's 8 o'clock GMT. Stade de France in Paris, refereed by Luke Pearce. Which I think
Luke Pearce is a Welshman, by the way. He's born in Wales, so it's
but he's RFU, isn't he?
Yeah, he's English. He's English rugby union, so it's definitely
it's no bother.
People will go crazy at Wales. There's been all of this sort of jam slam talk, which is, by the way, just nonsense. This team has been the best team in the tournament in the lead up to this week, purely because like people who are saying the jammy stuff just aren't valuing the clinicality on offence to the extent that it should be valued in this game, which is about accruing points.
Yes,
I mean, you can lose all the micro battles you want, but if you're the team that grabs tries when they come, your chances are you're going to win games. I mean, ask the All Blacks about it.
Indeed.
And Wales have had a lot of that about them.
Indeed.
But it'll certainly add fuel to the fire if like a controversial decision goes Wales' way, even if it's a right decision, with a guy who was born in Wales put in charge of the game. I just think it's
yellow card for Dupont on minute 2, that kind of carry on.
What saves Luke Pearce is that he is a great ref. He's one of the great refs in the game, and I think that could save him because he could do such a good job that everyone will have to shut up and accept her.
Yes, indeed. And to be fair, like, they're both lucky because they don't have to deal with a French ref.
Yes,
that's an intangible advantage that France always have, is they're never ref by a Frenchman.
Every other game is, though.
Yeah.
So there is that. The weather's going to be grand. It's going to be perfect conditions for running rugby. So without more ado, we'll get into the match colour.
Yes.
And obviously the marbles here are the Grand Slam marbles. That's
all at stake. Yeah. It's a Grand Slam decider. If Wales win it, they will take home the bacon in terms of that, and if France win it, conversely, then suddenly it flips and they have a game next weekend to take the championship, I think, off this tremendous Wales team.
I think that's right, but I think there is a scenario where France win this game and Wales win the championship,
which involves a losing bonus point for Wales.
It does, yeah. But they're like, I think France. Wales are going to have to be careful, obviously, about a big loss, and France, it'll be curious to see how they approach it, because they're 9 points behind Wales at the moment.
Yes.
They've got Scotland next week. Wales have a 24-point buffer on them, and so the scenario in this game is very similar to what it was when they were playing Ireland last autumn in the last game of last year's Six Nations.
Yes.
And so, like, they played that game. It was all about beating Ireland, as it turns out. They wanted to play better than Ireland, and they actually caught Ireland early with a good few scores. Ireland came back in, they caught them again, and they didn't pull away. They kind of made sure of the result. They kicked for territory. They took a couple of 3-pointers and put the game beyond Ireland, when in fact, like, they could have taken the tournament with something like a 30-point win,
which was possibly on the cards if they'd gone for it.
It certainly felt that way as an Ireland fan, looking at it, like we weren't in the game at all. And then they just never really did put the foot on the accelerator, and it was all about winning. What I find curious now is, like, back-to-back, obviously, Six Nations frustrations where they were in the mix to win a Grand Slam and then faltered in the second to last game. Obviously, this time it's a little different with them having the game next week as well that was postponed. But week 4 woes nonetheless for France. Round 4 woes. And now they find themselves in a position where they need a big win to secure the tournament. And given the second place finish last year and the final defeat in the Autumn Nations Cup, like, is second place good this year for this French team? I know they've played great rugby. They've arguably been the form side in the world post World Cup. But if you keep not winning trophies,
it's going to wear on you.
Yeah,
keep losing in Twickenham by narrow margins. All of these little things that they're building are not good in the psyche, especially of a young team. But
I think back to that French team in 2007, the French team of the mid-aughts. That it did culminate in that great World Cup final run, but that, again, it wasn't quite close enough. And while they did win some trophies, that team, like, little psychological ticks ended up exposing them, like having a bad record against England and then losing in a semi-final against England after beating the All Blacks and being just for all money a better team than that England team in 2007. Like, I think there's big picture stuff as far as winning a World Cup is concerned, and part of that involves just developing a winning mentality in competitions. I think if you're France, you got to go for this. You got to go for a big win. Especially if you start well. Obviously, everything is contextual.
If they're still in the scrap, if it's a level game, or if they're just behind in the last play of the game, you're going to kick Le Drop and try and get out of there with a win, and then hope that you can mutilate Scotland next week to try and take the championship that way.
Indeed, but I mean, here's a question for you: if you're in the lead and Wales have a losing bonus point.
Do you kick
it off, or does it depend where you are on the pitch? But let's say you have a midfield set piece.
No, you strike off that. Try and take it away.
Do they though? Do France?
No, they kick it out. But like in terms of what the right decision versus the one that's going to be made. Of course you attack and deprive Wales of a losing bonus point. Of course, that's how you play match footy. Will France do it in that scenario? No, of course not. Of course not. You kick it off. The win's a win.
Almost every team is going to kick it off with the lead there, and that's it's just a funny old dynamic because I think that the tournament needs to be in the back of France's mind because seeming the best team in the tournament 2 years running without winning it isn't necessarily good.
Everybody's favourite team to watch versus the team that always comes second. Like it's not fun being both.
No,
ask Clermont about it. It's not good.
Could this become like the Clermont equivalent at test level? It's a funny one. But for obviously the main colour from Wales's point of view, they've managed to win 4 from 4. They've won the Triple Crown.
They have a Grand Slam to play for. They have exciting young talent married with some really experienced heads. They're in a really good position going into next year and plodding forward into the World Cup. They have finally managed to marry that Wayne Pivac optimism in terms of ball and hand play with the kind of Welsh ethos, and they've managed to make it work where last year it was a bit more chop and change and it wasn't quite landing. Now they're in a great spot, and then just as well a bit of colour. If they are successful and if they do win this, that'll be Alan Wynn's 4th career Grand Slam. To put that in context, Ireland have 3. In our history. A tear shed for those in green.
It would be unreal.
I couldn't argue against him. If he does pull it off, the man, I can think of no men more deserving than that absolute warrior from Wales.
He's credentialed as hell. I mean, there's the all-time great locks argument is so stacked with legends. But I mean, you would find it hard to argue against Alan Wynne.
He's absolutely
keep it real. I'd pick him over Martin Johnson. And keeping it. I would and all.
Yeah, I'd do it again.
I might even pick him over John Eales. I mean, I don't know. I might be going crazy there.
Pick him over Victor Mitfield. He's a good one too.
You could go with Brodie and Alan Wynne in an all-time.
Brodie like Alan Wynne.
Yeah, it's hard to argue against them, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's true. There's a lot. There have been a lot of good locks, but he is definitely. He's just as well as being the lock. He's just so emblematic of all things combative and Wales and all things prickly about Welsh rugby and all things wily and wise about Welsh rugby. He's been a phenomenal servant. And he would deserve it. And then just an interesting little side note that I looked up as well is that apparently this is going to be the 101st game between these two teams. They've played 100 times so far since 1909. And the current record stands. Wales have won 51 of those games. France have won 46, with the others being draws. So it's pretty tight, It's just one of those great games. That's always a great game.
I without knowing anything about that run of records, I would say that they were heavily skewed in favour of Wales in the 70s, and then heavily skewed in favour of France in the 80s and probably the 90s as well. Yeah. And then
the early aughts Wales were pretty
and
dreadful.
When France first came into the Six Nations, they kind of tip everybody's record in a favourable direction as well, because they were kind of off the pace for a little while. Perhaps not as long as Italy have been, but for a while they were off the pace. So I think that probably skews in that direction. But nonetheless, fun stats. It's kind of even money going into this game in that regard. Just to look at the squads, we actually are in the favourable position of having the squads for once, because we started a little late this week. So France we'll start with them. They're the hosts. They've gone with much the same as expected. Still no Bernard Leroux, so Taufi Fanua, who's been class, fills in at lock. They stick with the same back row of Cretin, Olivon and Aldrit, Dupont and Jalibert, Fiku and Vakatawa, Pinot, Thomas and Doolan, which I'm pretty sure is exactly the same team. It is the
exact same team as last
which
week.
is curious, because they didn't use their bench at all, and now they have the same starting 15 who looked knackered at the end of that England game.
It's true. They do have good impact on the bench in terms of Camille Shah, Baptiste Gros, Unio Antonio actually back in the squad, recovered from COVID. I know he had been suffering from symptoms for slightly longer. which isn't that surprising. He's a big fella, and that, but it's good to see him back in there. He's on the bench now, so he's made a full recovery, and that's good.
And then they have obviously Gélange, Saran, Entomac as the unused men from last week still there, and Vincent Rattez comes in as well.
Rattez is a good impact in terms of out wide. They'll need to trust their men more, because if the pace of the game is high, as both of these sides will likely want it to be, that Wales and Pivac are gonna trust their benchmen. They've been rotating them all game. France need to have a little bit more faith in their finishers to finish the game, because they have a lot of calibre there.
Gélange was a weird one. They obviously fancied Wokey. He might have been showing them stuff in training, but to bring on Wokey and not Gélange, as much as I like Wokey, it didn't age well as a decision.
No, it didn't.
That was a rough one for them, and Wokey's obviously out of the 23 now as well, so
tough week for him.
But use Saran is definitely important,
and probably Entomac as well. If they're that tired, Entomac in to mix it up. Like you've seen from Wales, Bigger will play a great 50 minutes and then be hauled out of there, and Sheedy will play a great 30. Whereas Baptiste Saran is not the same player as Dupont, but he is a better player than Dupont post 60 plus minutes and 10 big hits from forwards. That's a diminished Dupont, and you have a fresh Baptiste Saran, which is a useful weapon. You better use it.
100%. The Wales squad similarly unchanged. Adam Beard comes back in as expected. He's been one of the players of the tournament, no surprises there. Same front row, Alan Wynne-Jones partnering Beard, and then the same back row, Navidi, Tipuric, Faletau. Gareth Davis and Dan Biggar come in. Biggar's been there. I'm not sure. Did Davis start
started last week as well. They went with him. There was a debate whether it would be Williams or Davies, but whoever it is, the other guy will come in and get at least 20 minutes. So we know that it's just.
Well, I kind of like the matchup. I kind of like starting with Davis and Biggar and then injecting Thomas Williams and Callum Sheedy in there.
I agree.
They stick with Davis and North, and then they have obviously that clinical back three of Rees-Zammit, Adams and Liam Williams, which is probably
wouldn't look out of place in Lions jerseys, those three boys.
Could be the Lions back three, man. I mean, Johnny May notwithstanding, that's it. Outside of that, I don't think anyone else is getting in. Hogg,
Duhan.
No, just Hogg. Hogg has a chance of ousting Liam Williams. But it could be the two Welsh winners. Not a chance. Hogg O'Keenan. Would you listen to him?
No.
That's the Welsh team. Unchanged. They've gone with consistency all year, and it's unsurprising to see them sticking with it going into this game.
No, compared to last year where they were chopping and changing everything every other game, this year they haven't done that. They have rotated once in, but they have fairly stuck to their guns as far as selection and been rewarded for some ballsy calls in terms of hauling off a guy like Biggar, who's playing really well in the England game, for a guy like Sheedy, who'll also go well. No, they've been brave, courageous and clinical is what you'd associate with this Welsh effort and this Welsh campaign, and they're right to stick with the team that have got them this far. It's right and proper for them to have the chance to go at it from minute one, and then you can change it if it's not going well.
I 100% agree with that. Moving on, we're just going to look at the sort of winning conditions and the general outlook of each of the two teams heading into this one, and we're going to start as we do with the hosts, who are France.
La France,
les Bleus. This is it's a big test on first and foremost of the Edwards D. I mean, I can't think of many tougher tests than the one they had last week, with the rhythm and the swagger of that English offence managing to set its tempo. And yet, I thought going into last week that if England's offence sets its tempo, it is undefendable. And France proved that wrong with hustling, scramble defence from out of this world, and they'll need it all again.
Everyone working so hard off the ball to cover, to plug holes and fill that space. It's been great. Now this, as tough as that test was from that purring English offence, this is a different and arguably tougher, because as much as England, when they set that rhythm, can look undefendable, once you break their rhythm a little, they can become very sloppy, whereas Wales are a team that can lull and then strike, and they can mix up their rhythms probably a little bit better than England. England are a team that like to get on top of you and then set their pace, and you saw in the World Cup final when South Africa smashed them every time and they couldn't get any rhythm, that they're a little bit impotent, whereas Wales will comfortably kind of play a few different kind of games, and they'll increase the pace very quickly when they see a chance, and they can slow it down as well and play a more tempered one. So it's definitely a tough task. If Wales are anything like as clinical as we saw them in weeks 1 through 3, then this Edwards D could be in for its toughest test today. We don't know.
In the build up to their set piece try, the wonderful set piece try they scored against England off the top of the line out, they exited probably as well as they had all game, because the exits have been a struggle for both of these teams.
Yes, that's true.
But France's in particular last week was just terrible. They managed no territory, and they were kind of just could not get out of their half for the whole game.
Yeah.
And it was a struggle for them against Ireland as well. So it's probably their number one work on is just how limited they have been in their ability to set an offensive tempo, because they haven't been able to attack for large parts of games as good as their attack has been. And Wales similarly had that issue as well, as we'll talk about with them. But France, like the key thing that they've worked in, which could work to their favour going forward, is the turnover game. I think we saw it against England in abundance, and we saw it off an exit, off a counter-attack, off an exit in the lead up to that try. That's how they got it. They kicked out of their half, jackled the ball off first phase exit, went up the pitch, and then scored a try off the line out.
Perfect. Yeah.
That's like, they haven't been able to kick long without Boutier. That's still a problem.
Yeah.
They're going to have to work on their kicking game, but isolating the counter-attacking runners from Wales, keeping the ball in field and trying to isolate counter-attacking runners could be a good entry point to them, because I'm looking at their kicking game and I'm like, how are they going to ever dominate a territory game? How are they ever going to gain access into the team's half? Because it was a real problem for them against both Ireland and England.
Yeah. Well, one of the things they need to do is just be a bit more controlled. Like, as much as like both of these teams will want to be high tempo when they have the offensive chances, and when they're attacking, they want to be playing quick rugby, quick ruck ball, and isolated numbers. Both of these sides play with good, proper ambition in that regard. But Wales are the team I think are the little more wise in terms of how they go about it, in terms of like the random start to the game. As great as the first half last week was, and as understandable as it is for France to kind of want to create a chaotic, frenzied kind of game that they feel they're the more skillful to operate in, that can be fine. But quick throw-ins in the first quarter in your own 22 that end up being a random hit-up and then a left-footed box kick chip from Dupont, that's terrible. Like no matter who you are, if you're France or if you're Georgia, that's terrible. Like it doesn't matter. Like, that's not how you exit at all. It's not how you play in your own it's fundamentally silly. And they need to stop being fundamentally silly, because like when they apply themselves, like, they know how to switch on when the chance is on, and that's still a very important skill. It's one of the things they're best in the world at, this team, is like a transition when a loose ball gets pounced on and then it's in Dupont's hands and suddenly everyone knows how to attack. That's fine, but setting that pace when you're trying to exit, or being that frenetic in your own half, and then ultimately it results in a terrible kick, like, they just need to be a little bit more calm in these exchanges. Like, trust that, like, if they're going to do a box kick setup, you can do it slowly and take your time and get it right and get Pinot under. Like, your
wingers are one of the few plays in rugby that doesn't benefit from speed.
No, because you end up like the kick is tough to get right when you're doing it that quickly, and then it's tough to time your runners if you're doing it that frenetically. And no, it's a more deliberate pace, as Ireland have demonstrated for many years how to slow it up and kick it in the air and chase it. They have wingers that will hustle, and that, like, Pinot under the high ball is a weapon, but you need to tee it up a little bit more accurately and a little bit more measured. It would be nice to see a France team that are a bit more malleable as far as tempo is concerned. It feels like they're either frenetic or exhausted.
And they just need to value territory. They're so lethal when they get opportunities in the opposition half, and they do, as a rule, kick in their own half. They tried to speed things up and then kicked a little bit in the English half, but just like even off set pieces on their own 10, work the extremities and put a kick in deep, and then force Wales to exit, and Wales' exit hasn't been great either, and then you can set up your dream, which is a set piece in the opposition half from which you can strike, and that's the fun one, that matchup. I mean, there's, as good as the Welsh D can be, I mean, flooding the channels of in and around George North with players working those beautiful set piece moves, where there's just such a lovely balance and rhythm to the backline at the moment, with Fiku and Vakatawa as different kind of distributors and different kind of runners, equally threatening in both.
Very dominant in contact.
Midfield is so dangerous.
It's the biggest test for George North so far from Wales' point of view. From France's point of view, you're dead right, overloading his channel with runners, because like, he as experienced ahead as George North is, defending the 13 channel is tough at test level, and defending the 13 channel against Vakatawa and all the French runners either side of him is just a mammoth task, a huge task, and they want to overload him. They want to find space there.
I love working those two centres, sitting down the Welsh inside D with the threat of those two centres, and if North drifts off them, then you can't drift off Vakatawa, because he'll just cut in and destroy
through. Or Fiku. Fiku will take that line too.
So working Fiku in as like a first receiver with Vakatawa outside him, and those two potentially linking up can sit down a whole defence, and then you know when you whip it out the back that you have the speed of hands and the sleight of play or the sleight of hand and the speed of play to get outside them and isolate a bit of space for your winger. And it's a very simple formula but beautiful to watch when it works. And then obviously the other thing is just that beautiful support play. Once they cut a line, once they work an angle, playing off one another and keeping the ball alive. And I think that's as important against Wales, is not allowing their Jackal Threat and their Tippericks and Beards of the world and Ken Owenses of the world to get on top of you and to slow up your ball and to fall on the wrong side as they love to do.
That stuff.
You have to keep the ball alive, as they did against England. I think keeping the ball alive is beautiful. I think working a high tempo is beautiful. They identified that beautifully at the start of the game, but doing it in the right areas of the field, doing it when you have the ball and Wales want to slow it down. That's when you've got to speed it up.
That's where a little bit more
game management,
a little bit more
game
game
management.
management.
They're not too far away.
No, they aren't. They aren't, and they still have useful assets. Guys like actually, I was going to give a shout out to Aldrit and Olivon, because as much as keeping the ball alive is good, and you've seen Taufi Fanua offload out of the tackle, those guys, when they needed to, as much as that's razzle dazzles, every now and then you just need to tuck it and run, and those guys have carried brilliantly all tournament long into big packs, into the English pack. They were just going all day and going forward more often than not. They've been huge, and Olivon as captain has been brilliant. He's brilliant at line out as well, but those two are guys that they can go to when things are a little bit more frenetic, like I was saying, just kind of controlling things. As much as you do want to offload out of the ruck, when it's not on, doesn't have to be done, but just emphasize quick ball, even if it's a recycle. From France's point of view, they're looking to obviously bounce back from disappointment last week, so that they it'll take some things going their way in the first half before they'll really kind of glean that confidence. And
I think they have to. I think Wales are very much a second half team in a lot of ways. They've been struggling in first quarters of games and sometimes bailing themselves out in the second quarter, and then the third quarter really is when they've showed their acumen. And then against England it was the fourth quarter as well. So it's not been at the beginning of games where they've really taken the game by the scruff of the neck.
So maybe France can.
And for France, conversely, it has been in a lot of ways when they can get opportunities. So just being composed but really working that Welsh defence to try and build a lead and unsettle a Welsh team that hasn't had to do, well, it has had to do some coming back, but that doesn't like being behind, as no team does. Getting that advantage is going to be huge. And I think one of the areas where they got caught by England for much of that game last week, as brilliant as their set piece try was and their opening try, England's defence came flooding out of the line, and France were too inclined to try and go for the sort of Hail Mary chip and chase or crossfield kick. If Wales,
which often amounts to kicking the ball.
You can kick, but you just got to kick better. I think trusting the boot of Jalibert and trying to kick for territory and forcing Wales to exit. And forcing
it's a useful thing, because Welsh wingers, as we've often said, and it has always been true, Welsh wingers do like to kind of drift up into the line, especially when the defence goes one or two phases. Just they kind of pull up a little bit. They do by nature. They all do. They haven't. So it's often a good resource is to try and kind of move that pendulum around with good little touch finders or grass finders, and because Liam Williams is great bomb diffuser in the air, you maybe try and kick for grass, kick for touch, low trajectory ones.
100%.
Isolate that. That's definitely something I would like to see France work in there. That's on Jalibert. That is on Jalibert, I think. We haven't quite seen his kicking acumen.
It's such a Dupont run offense is the thing, and Dupont isn't a kicker by trade. It's not what he does. And when he's trying to take the lead on everything and he's kicking the balls, that's almost him saying to Jalibert, I kind of need you to take charge. And I definitely think if things are stalling in the midfield and they're finding their ball slowed down, obviously you try and speed it up, you try and get your big ball carriers in the ball, but I think in a multi-phase situation you're just trying to work an angle in the midfield to peg the ball deep and force Wales to exit and then strike again. Attacks are dying a death after a few phases at the moment, and I think you have to be wise to that. And with a team as smart as Wales as well, you don't want to be
combative in the contact. They'll soak a few yards to isolate you. They are just very wise and wily in terms of how they go about it, and very very much don't be frustrated when you do end up getting isolated or something. Just don't compound that. Don't allow Wales to start making that the story of the game is that your tacklers are getting isolated, the breakdowns are taking too long, and then France's attack stalls. That's what you kind of want to avoid. You want to keep it out of that breakdown, and then, as you're saying, identify when an attack is stalling and you need to get rid of it.
Yeah.
Because there will be times like that. Like the Welsh defence is pretty good. You're not going to overload them all the time. But that being said, striking off set piece, they did produce, as we said, one of the greatest set piece strike plays of all time. If they have another one in their locker, maybe break it out this time to stuff the Welsh too.
100%. Keep working those extremities, keep working that class centre partnership you have, and there will be tries out there for you. And then on defence, just working those hustling Shaun Edwards plays, those to the nth degree. The scramble D was from another level last week, and it needs to be this week as well. There's scope for this to be a brilliant game because there's the best two offensive teams in the tournament.
And that is also, as soon as the whistle goes, don't trot towards the posts. It's a bad idea. Don't turn your back on Dan Bigger and the boys and kind of complain to the ref.
Did you hear the moment with Pot last week when he was talking to Sexton to tell us he told Sexton to talk to his players, and Sexton was just not having it.
Yeah,
and he was like, "No, Johnny, what do you say? Don't be afraid." Something like that. Don't be afraid to talk to your players. And it's like, I am afraid.
These Welsh tappers and goers might just tap and go.
On that occasion, it was whoever we were playing.
I think it was Scotland in that instance, but it was like, yes, the tap and go is always alive. But it's no, that was just a facetious enough point, but it's true. Don't turn your back on the play even after the whistle goes.
Wales will tap and go. You got to mind that.
Yeah,
if you're giving away penalties and you're blowing, you got to stay away, because there's no better team at noticing that than
Wales at the moment. That's been one of the stories of the Six Nations for them. And I suppose we will pivot on to the Welsh now, looking at them. Yeah, they need to score tries. 100%.
That's what they do.
That's what they do. It's what their team has been about. It's what their success has been built on. They got to score tries. They got to attack the French. They need to, obviously, on defence, they need to. It's probably a tougher task because the defence hasn't been perfect. Like, it hasn't. No. Certainly against the Scots in the opening quarter, that is a concerning picture for them, because the French are not as likely as Scotland to blow it on either side of half time as Scotland did ultimately. Like, they were very fortuitous in that game to get the try that they did just before half time that gave them the little bit of belief and then momentum to manage to dig it out of the fire. But like, starting a game like that against this French team in Paris is curtains. You've got to be alive to the danger from minute one, and there is danger. Like, Dupont leading the offence, you saw from the opening set, the opening little stanza, 2 minutes last week in Twickenham, just how electric he can be.
1 minute. They scored that try on 1 minute.
Sorry, on the opening 1 minute, excuse me. But Dupont was picking it up, running, fixing pillars, and then putting guys into space. They were moving the ball very, very nicely. And Vakatawa as an option straight back in there. You forgot just how much he did for this French offence when you see him there in with Ficou, sitting guys down. Like, the line he ran for that set piece try, he didn't touch the ball, but the line Vakatawa runs is what creates the ocean of space that Jalibert finds himself in to then execute the pass. He draws in like 3 defenders. He sits down.
And if he doesn't, he receives a pass and cuts through. Like, if England don't put 3 on him, it's already going to be a danger.
Big game. Like, I've loved what I've seen from George North all tournament long, and Davies North is a combination that I think has a lot of potential. I think Davies, I
love seeing them linked together, even though it was against Italy. Like, it is just refreshing to see it, a centre combination not be 2 different cogs of the 10s chess game, and actually a combination that links up with each other. Paisami and Pataya is the only other one I can think of really in World Rugby right now. The All Blacks struggle with it, Ireland struggle with it, but even France,
England's less balanced even as well.
But seeing like 2 centres playing off one another, there's like that's what excites the rugby purist in me.
France, Ficou, Vakatawa is not bad.
Yeah, but they don't really play off on each other. They they each work as their own man, and I definitely love the idea of Wales working in those plays where you can have both of those guys starting the game well. But I think at the initial point of the game, the defence is going to come under scrutiny.
It will. France are going to start at the highest pace of the game that France will play it is the first quarter, and you got to be alive to that. You cannot start slow. Big job for Liam Williams as well. He's the bomb diffuser usually, but he will be the last ditch tackler, I'd imagine, on a few occasions, because France,
been doing that really well.
He has been doing it really well, but it's a different ball game against France, because when they cut the line, they are better than most teams in the Northern Hemisphere and better than most teams in the world, to be honest, at running proper support lines and converting those chances. So Liam Williams will be a busy man all day in terms of shutting that down. But I'm curious how the back line contains it. And then I'm kind of curious about the back row, because like Navidi, Tipuric, Faletau, they have been busy all tournament long. They will have to be again. They will have to be covering a lot of ground, particularly on defence. Now they have the chops to do that. Navidi's performance last week against Italy, where he was making like 18 tackles and assisting tries and doing that, You'll need to be a bit of that. There needs to be Duracell bunny mode.
Yeah, all three of them, their biggest strength has been their capacity to play for 80 minutes.
Yes,
I mean,
cardio,
they've
pure
got
cardio.
Yeah, they've got James Botham on the bench now instead of Wainwright.
Yeah.
Purely because Wainwright's impact wasn't that good, because he was coming on for a guy who was relatively fresh and in the side ahead of him. Like, there's almost scope for, you know, I'd almost sooner see them change both locks than take any of them off, but obviously needs must as far as having a back row sub, and that makes all the sense in the world. But those guys are going to have, they are, as always, key to what Wales do. And they're an area where Wales will see an edge, as good as Aldrit and Olivon have been, and it's another really exciting matchup.
High level matchups all over this. Yeah.
Wales are going to be excited about the prospect of getting in there,
particularly in the final quarter. That's where it'll pay dividends. And that's why I think staying in touch is key for Wales. I
agree.
I think there's scope for this to play out like a recent Wales win over England, or many of those recent Wales, like the one even in the World Cup where they're behind for most of the game, but only by a score, and it's an annoying game where the tempo hasn't quite been set. There've been a few set pieces, and then bang, Wales try, and that's how the games are won. Like, there's definitely scope for that, because France have wilted in the last quarter, and Wales conversely haven't. They always back their fitness. It was a hallmark of Warren Gatlin's side that, like, we're the fittest side in world rugby, boys. You know, they've always prided themselves on that, and there's been a lot of truth in it for a while. And conversely, France are not a cardio machine. They are a flashbang and then fade.
I actually
don't trust their bench as much. So
I don't think they have bad cardio, France. It's just that sometimes they can set such a crazy tempo that they end up tiring themselves out, which can be a problem. Ireland do something similar, except not with a high tempo, with high attrition.
Yes.
But they end up doing it to themselves and fading in that regard. Yeah, but I don't doubt what you're saying is true, and I think that tactically is explained and revealed by the sort of the slower halfback pairing to start the game,
and then the injecting of tempo in the second.
Indeed. So I think Wales want the first half to be certainly slower than France, England was last week.
If they were 12-9 down in a bunch of 3-pointers, that would suit Wales down to the ground.
And I don't see them. I don't see them giving France. Like, I think they're a very disciplined side at the best of times, and they sort of get away with, you know, playing on the margins better than any other team. Again,
they understand the margins better than most teams, to be honest. Like, Alan Wynne is always an interesting character in terms of he reveals laws in his game. There'll be a controversial moment where the ref has to scold him, and then there'll be a thing online going like, oh, just to clear up that thing that Alan Wynne was talking about there. There's a fair bit of that goes on. They do understand the laws, and they understand how to bend them.
But that's my point, is that when France are setting a frenetic early pace, I expect to see Wales legally or illegally killing the attack. And I think ideally you want to do it legally. You want to get your tip bricks in, you want to get your slow tackles in, you want to wrap the ball, try and attack it, try and turn over the ball. But then failing that, you will see them fall on the wrong side. You will see them slow everything up.
Welsh hands, big red hands in
Welsh
there.
hands to slow up the French could be a huge narrative for them, because they want the pace of the game to be slower. France take threes. As much as they're an offensive team, they take threes, and if Wales can limit the number of offensive opportunities that France get, and then limit the French opportunities to 3-pointers by and large,
that's how they win. That's a big step one in terms of they then have to be clinical themselves with the ball.
And they also have to improve the kicking game as well, because as much as it's been a French weakness, it has also been a Welsh weakness, and I think that's what Davis and Biggar are in there to do: manage that first 50 minutes, get them down, spending most of the time in the French half, frustrate the French, and then even if France looked scary in moments, they can stay in touch, inject Williams and Sheedy, and then striking particularly off set piece. Because as good as the Edwards defence is, you know, when you're 6 on 6 in a line in a with a field of space, Wales are better than most at exposing that. And I think now that Davis and North might be purring as a unit, I think there's just danger all over there from a Welsh point of view.
Absolutely. The other question mark I had is, can Wyn Jones keep being an absolute nuisance all around the park? Because he has been all tournament long. He's been bloody brilliant, I think.
And Mohamed Houas has been caught in back-to-back times now. I think he's been caught at the scrum as well. And you know, Wyn Jones managed to get Xander Fagerson to give away a sloppy penalty, and I think he also managed to get Andrew Porter to give away a sloppy penalty.
On the first first engagement.
Yeah,
no, he's wide, and then in the
slippery.
loose, he's slippery.
Yeah.
He's all over. I really like the hustle out of Wyn Jones. I think he's had a phenomenal tournament.
He has.
So he will be a useful asset in exactly that way. That really Welsh way. Like Ken Owen will do it all day as well. Of just like you were saying, falling on the wrong side, and just rolling away, like falling on the wrong side and then rolling away. He's not lying
just making
there,
sure it's not France's
it's
tempo.
Not clean ball, and it's Dupont is tripping over you to get the ball out and that kind of stuff. Those little subtle plays are very important, and then the line out as well, because I think set piece is something that Wales should target, particularly the line out. They have good acumen. They have Tipuric, who's a great jumper. They have Alan Wynne, who's a great reader, and they have a French team that are going to want to launch off set piece, that particular set piece. So pressuring the throw, because like
not much you can do if he throws it to Fiku in midfield.
Not much you can do. Like you're going to make allowances for great plays like that, and that'll be on the centres then to try and shut that down. It's a big old ask. I know it is.
I mean,
good
if
luck.
they execute at that level, I don't know how you defend.
Yeah, you
that
tip
set
your hat
piece.
to that try anyway. Like if that try gets scored against you, you're just like, well, fair play. That's a bloody good try. But no, like disrupting the more traditional ball, because their back row are the ones that tend to jump. France, they don't actually, and they have Taufi Fanua now instead of Bernard Leroux, so it's quite
two colossal
locks who are not that easy to jump or to get up there. So it's good scope for disrupting that set piece. And like you're saying, ruck ball, line out ball, just source ball, make it a little slower on the French. Make it just a little bit scrappier. Even if it's a knock on, just getting a hand on the ball in the line out that ends up being a scrum, then that's all a little slower than France want.
I like shortened line outs for Wales as well when they're on their own set piece. I like the variation of getting Beard in pods on the wide channels.
Beard in pods on the wide channels has been brilliant.
I'm
glad he was straight back in there actually, because there was question marks, because I think it was Corey Hill played last week and he played well, but no, they went with the right option because he's great as a distributor.
Get him in there, set up those little screens, those little deceptions on the outside channels, and test the extremity of the Edwards defence, which has been good, and they shouldn't be afraid, especially in the early goings, to kick balls. I mean, it's like, if there is a bet, there's no bigger test of Wales's clinicality, whatever about Italy, just by sheer maths of giving you all the chances in the world. Like, the Edwards defence has been so miserly, even when it looks like they're just surefire going to concede. They just
managed to scrag you.
They managed to scrag you, exactly right. And Wales are going to have to be patient in that regard, but they're also going to have to strike. They're also going to have to try and access where the weak points are. Does Vakatawa not shoot out of line one too many times?
Maybe.
And working little pods in and around that 13 channel could be a great way of exposing that. Even dummying going wide to your Rees-Zammits, who I'm sure France are going to be mindful of.
Looking the calibre of winger on display in this game is phenomenal. Josh Adams and Rees-Zammit for Wales, then you have Pinot and Teddy Thomas on the other side. This is like World 15 stuff, absolute razzle dazzle, and I back the ball carrier in that scenario.
Always,
every winger with the ball is the one with the advantage.
France are not giving up stuff off the ball. Their defence was arguably more impressive than their offence last week. It was so impressive. And that's why this matchup when Wales have the ball is just super exciting. It was brilliant last week with England and England going punch for punch with the French defence, and Wales will likely do the same. But Wales have been so clean and crisp with how they've been striking off set piece and how they've been getting.
Can they keep it up, or will they falter? This is the question. Can they keep finding those tries against top level defences? Because if they can, then they're worthy Grand Slam winners.
The key is executing when you get there. The key is like when you've got numbers, when you've worked the advantage, you cannot have a moment like Josh Adams had last week.
Where
you
get held up even though you're over the line.
Outside of the Italy game, they have been taking those chances. They need to work them again against France, and they need to be mindful of the fact that the French contacts have been vicious as well.
Yes,
because
very tough.
They are brutally physical. France,
guys like Taufi Fanua, like big lumps in there, and then guys like Camille Shack coming off the bench as well. Big impacts. I expect some huge collisions over the course of the 80 minutes, and proper tussle in France. I expect a beautiful game of rugby, to be honest.
I do too. I think it's on paper it's the best game of the tournament. You were citing it from way back. You thought as soon as Wales did for Scotland, you were like, Grand Slam, here we go. Looking forward to that Wales-France game, and right you were. I always thought France would win the Slam, but just a little lacking in nous against England. And I think, if nous is where they're lacking, if nous is where it's to be decided, it's going to be Wales all day.
Wily Wales versus naive France is definitely a victory picture for Wales.
The French picture for victory is to blow Wales away. Which they can do.
It can happen.
But I think I agree with you, because I know you're going to pick Wales. I know you, so I think I agree with you that it's likely that a team as shrewd as Wales probably negotiate the first part of the match well and then see it home in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I think that's what I see happening.
Yeah.
But then I don't know. I don't sleep on this French outfit either, and I know that they are hurting and that they, like you were alluding to with their seeking of trophies, it's got to result in a home win here to stuff the Grand Slam and then try and nick it next week. I think as far as your initial point in terms of do they go for the extra bonus point or whatever, I think a win's a win here first, and then they'll try and win it next week if they can. They're under no illusions about this Welsh team. This is a dangerous Grand Slam seeking side coming to town. Any kind of win is a good one for France.
Yeah.
That being said, I suspect that the Welsh momentum is too much and will carry them there. I think Wales will manage to see it out.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. The only thing I would say is that this French team play a lot like the All Blacks, and if you want to be the All Blacks, the way to respond to a defeat is with a backlash.
Yes.
And
there could be that.
Yeah, exactly. If they just hit their rhythm and all of their key weapons can turn on their A game, and Fiku and Vakatawa are just linking up and opening up defences, and you know how good their tracking runs are, and once they get in behind you, they're just so clinical and so beautiful to watch that they just can put try after try after try on teams. That could be a picture too, and I think that would be exciting for World Rugby and for French Rugby if they could do something similar. But I don't see them winning a tight one somehow. I just think they're the younger, more naive team, and a tight one is always more likely in the Six Nations, so probably Wales as well.
There you go. Yeah. That's what we got.
Anyway,
what you got? Let us know.
Indeed. That does.
Thank you very much for watching that video. If you're new here, please do like and subscribe and ring the bell so you get notified when we upload again. But mainly, please drop a comment down below. We enjoy hearing your thoughts on it. Thanks.